So when you begin reading chapter 2 of Yvonne Chireau's Black Magic, and you see that she begins with the story of Equiano, you might be delighted in the seamless move from our last book, the very same Equiano, to our new book. There's a really good reason methodologically why it is the case that she too is attracted to Equiano as an exemplary narrative that would help us to understand African American, the roots of African American religious culture as they are described by Olaudah Equiano. And she's very interested in this book in helping us understand that there are words like religion, magic, black magic, conjure, hoodoo, voodoo, root work, that were part of a constellation of orientations that people moved between, similarly to the way that contemporary modern people can move between different kinds of orientations during the course of a day. You might find yourself kind of shifting gears if you're on a sports team, or shifting gears when you walk into the office, and shifting gears when you're moving into your house. In the case here, what we're interested in is a relationship to supernatural power. And by supernatural, then we mean more than natural. So more than the fact that the flower can bloom, which would be a natural power, would be if the flower could protect you, if its roots could protect you from the potential violence of a day, and thus you would harvest the root, talk to the root, understand it to have a kind of power and efficacy in the world that you might carry in your hand, a little medicine type bag that you would carry with you, and that would be called your hand. It would be a hand that would carry that supernatural power with you. Now, nevertheless, I'm going to do a quick review over some of the most important ideas from chapter 1, because there is going to be a little bit of a gap, largely with this vocabulary of conjure, hoodoo, voodoo, root work, until one is familiar, because these are generally going to be quite new terms. And the idea that conjure, like the word Christianity, it sounds like both a noun and a verb, doesn't? To conjure something is to kind of inculcate that power. And conjure also sounds and is used like a noun throughout the book. So until we get a little more familiar with that, so I'm going to cover some of what I think are the most important points from chapter 1 that are going to help you hit chapter 2 a little more smoothly. So on page 12 she writes, conjure is a magical tradition in which spiritual power is invoked for various purposes, such as healing, protection, and self-defense. The relationship between conjure and African American religion, in particular Christianity, is somewhat ambiguous. So ambi, meaning two. Ambivalent can be two valences, two values. Ambiguous, I'm both attracted and repulsed by this, right? So you've got two directions. You're both toward and away from psychological directions at work. Ambiguous. So the relationship between Christianity and conjure is somewhat ambiguous. Conjure is usually associated with magical practices, unlike Christianity, which is seen as religion. Right? Like one is magic, one is religion. Certainly the priests and clerical classes of the Christian slavers who were baptizing slaves, for instance, would have thought of conjure as not Christianity, not religion, and they would have wanted to create a very distinct contrast. But as you already know, because you've been through Equiano, and as you're learning from Chireau, that divide is not rigid in the lives of slaves. So the very term magic, one of the things, the nice point she makes is that magic is what you call the religion of the other. So that, that's just magic. What we got the real thing. This is religion. So we're looking at how these categories, the terms religion and magic, work. And she does give us her definition. She does give us that sense of, with magic, you're thinking that it's this zap, that I can zap you. I have an efficacy with my wand that is different than our collective prayers asking for forgiveness or strength or those kinds of things. So religion is that collective work, whereas magic is the more individual, efficacious work that says, I can control this matter to effect a supernatural power, right? So, but she also wants to say that it's unlike Christianity, seen as a religion, a dichotomy that suggests they are in conflict with one another. Yet from slavery days to the present, many African Americans have readily moved between Christianity, conjure, and other forms of supernaturalism with little concern for their purported incompatibility. So we're looking for a kind of fluidity of awareness. Let's get that mind of a religious person on the landscape navigating, and the capacity to adjust and adapt. So if you've got the plantation priest there, and you're interested in the kind of power that helps him, I mean, he's having a pretty good life compared to you. Maybe you ought to be tapping into some of this Christianity stuff. And what kind of liberation is that this Bible is telling you about, right? So you got one set of interests there. And then when he leaves and the plantation owner stops by with the overseer who's got a whip, then maybe you're just reaching inside your what little bit of clothing you have to just touch your hand, right, your magical amulet, to try for a little bit of power to protect you from this overseer. So a sense of moving, like, I don't care if the Catholic priest told me or the Protestant minister told me that conjure is bad and heathen and pagan, because when you're close to me and he's not, I'm looking for anything that can help me. And from my material world, my relationship to this world that I work so hard in, I'm going to seek some power from that. So what is this relationship, and how do we use these terms in a more sophisticated or at least careful way? She writes, religious leaders in slave communities were entrusted with the knowledge and responsibility for maintaining spiritual traditions. If anybody ever sat at a table where the adults started the prayer or the grace, you know what it is for someone to be in charge of passing on spiritual traditions. These leaders included both Christian ministers and conjurers. Occasionally, these offices were shared by a single person, so it could be that the slave owner realized such and such a person is kind of a leader, and so they get them in with the priest to kind of give them the black slave minister role among the slaves, as well as that person might have been recognized by the slave owner because the other people, the slaves, were actually paying them respect and attention because they were already established among the slaves as a conjurer. So that same person might have risen in the eyes of both the slave and the slaveholding community. And so they might end up running both orientations. So, with regard to the power that the orientation toward religion and conjure offered people, this is my point. If we're not just thinking of religion as belief, but we are thinking of religion as an orientation, then part of what we understand is that body on the land is always, in terms of its ultimate significance, is always interested in questions of power and having access to the kinds of power, including supernatural power, that will help them succeed. So don't be surprised that religious lives are always about questions of power. This will help you understand anytime you've ever heard a Christian hymn. They are so loaded with God, all powerful, all knowing, all this, all that. The religious lives are always interested in the question of how do I navigate and access the kind of power with which I receive the benefits in this world that has both scarcity and prosperity, right? It is a question of power. With regard to the power that the orientation toward religion and conjure offered to people, quote, the assurance that these individuals, so like let's say a minister or a conjurer, supplied to persons in the enslaved community was often indispensable. Such defenses, the defenses offered by the religious leaders and conjurers against the psychological and physical assault of slavery, were essential for many African Americans who endured a system in which their humanity was devalued and their collective efforts at self-determination were constantly hindered. Now, I'm going to upload this piece of paper so that you can read these for yourself. But let's think about this as an orientation that was understood to be indispensable in the face of the kinds of tolls that being part of an enslaved community was taking on you, right? That means it's not fluff. It is vital. And if we think of religious person under that arc of cosmological meaning, that conjure and Christianity, in the ambivalent relationship they had on slave plantations, both understood as indispensable to surviving. She writes further, conjuring arbitrated, and to arbitrate is to kind of go between, arbitrated the day-to-day conflicts in which slaves were confronted with white slaveholder domination, which was often directed and enforced through violent means. So conjure becomes your clutch, a bit of a clutch that helps you navigate and arbitrate between this arbitrary and often violent, pretty well maintained through the threat of violence, if not delivered daily through that violence. And so conjure arbitrated those daily conflicts for you.